can imagine that's challenging, especially living on the property. You know, we've had times at our venues where people just show up for a tour unannounced because they just kind of think it's, you know, a business, it's a storefront. You just kind of show up during business hours.
You know, and other times people are super respectful about it, but also like on the venue aspect of things, you know, like this is my home. Like you need to treat it like yours.
Welcome to the Venue RX. On this show, we document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues.
What's up, everyone? Jonathan here with the Venue RX. And on this show, we talk to professionals in this industry as well as venue owners. And that segment of this show is one of my favorites. We talk to venue owners. We hear about all the struggles, all the successes, everything that goes into running a wedding venue on a day-to-day basis. And I am really excited to have my friend Kate here today. We recently met out at Wedding MBA, and she has a fascinating story and runs a very cool venue in New York. And so, Kate, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to dive into your venue. This venue is a family venue, right? It's kind of a legacy piece for you and your family, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so share a little bit. How did your family get in the wedding industry to begin with?
So my dad went to the Culinary Institute of America down in Hyde Park, New York, and he really just loved cooking. So he ended up starting a catering business out of my grandparents' basement. And he bought what we have now when he was 26 and just kind of expanded and expanded. We started doing, I say we, but he, because it started before me. But he started doing fish fries on Fridays mostly. And people loved it so much that they, eventually kind of asked, do you do private parties? Do you do weddings? And those events happen on, Fridays and Saturdays. So eventually they just kind of took over our Fridays and Saturdays. So the fish fry business kind of stopped and weddings took over and private parties and corporate functions. And then, the small little fish fry restaurant turned into our big banquet room and then expanded into our lobby. And then in 1994, my dad added another room and we just kind of kept going and never stopped.
That's really neat. And how old are you when, were you a part of the first Fish Fry days, or were you kind of just your first memories were at the venue? Kind of what stage what was your first memory, I guess, of the venue and this process?
So memory, that's a loaded question, but I apparently was born on a Wednesday, but I was brought home on Fish Fry Friday. So before I guess even came home from the hospital, I stopped here at work on a Fish Fry Friday. So my parents showed me off to all of the patrons on Fish Fry Friday, which is really funny because when I had my first son, I didn't go home. I came here on an event day and showed my oldest, who's now 12, to all of the staff and everything. So it was super weird because I didn't even realize that my parents did the same thing to me as I did to my oldest.
Oh my gosh. So day one, pretty much day one, you're at the venue.
Yeah. I mean, there's pictures of a pink baby stork, on our signs of it's a girl, it's a baby girl. Yeah, my parents were really excited. All the staff was really excited. A couple of my old bartenders actually just retired who have worked here since I was 3 years old. So, a lot of our staff has been around since I was a kid. And, it's really funny because if people refer to me as Katie, they knew me from when I was a kid. And then people who call me Kate know me in my adult years. So a lot of people can differentiate how long somebody has known me in my lifetime in this industry and in this world of my life.
I don't think I mentioned this when we met, but my youngest sister's name is Catherine, and growing up, very similar, we called her Katie. So I'll call her Katie or, Katie. or just sis, And as she's gotten older, she does real estate, she's getting more professional. She's like Kate, Catherine. So I hear her say that. And that's, again, one of those differentiators. So was there a point where you are in this family business? I mean, like you said, from day one, and was there a point where you decided, hey, I want to be a part of the family business? Was there ever a time where you hated it? Like, tell me a little bit of your view on it growing up inside this industry.
So my parents split when I was young. So my dad started everything, but my mom was obviously here with him. So they split when I was probably about 11 or so. So, up until that point, I was really, really into it, all of the things, going to the market with my grandparents, washing all of the windows with, newspaper and vinegar and all the mirrors. I mean, mirrors were everywhere in the 90s. So they were in every room, all over the place, So I was so into it, growing up into it all the time. And then when my parents split, I stayed with my mom primarily. So, I would still kind of come in on like days that dad had me and whatnot. But, once I got a little bit older and, going through like high school, I ended up going into nursing school. And then I had my oldest, left nursing school, and then I got a job at Geico for a while, and I loved that job for a while, and I did really well, and insurance was great, clock in, clock out, you're done. And then my dad called and he was like, hey, we just did a huge renovation again, and do you wanna come work here? And I was like, I don't know. Like, just you go to work, you do your thing, you leave, Somebody tells you when you can go to the bathroom, when you can take your break. There's no, crazy, right? And it's like, do I really want to go work for my dad? Okay. So I left. And then I've been here ever since. So I don't think there was really ever a point where I hated it. I was never forced into it. You know what I mean? Like, it was here if I wanted to be here. But my parents never forced me into it. Everybody knew that it was we're in a small town, everybody, it's my last name, it's Kotecki and Kotecki. So it was always like, hey, do your parents have that? Hey, is that you? So it wasn't something that I wasn't aware of, or, people didn't know that I wasn't a part of it, but it was never shoved down my throat hey, this is your path. This is what you have to do. So I think that was something that made me kind of not feel unpressured or a disdain towards it. I never hated it.
And you mentioned something that was interesting to me, and I don't think enough people talk about this or realize this when getting into this industry. You mentioned real insurance kind of being this you go in, you clock in, you've got your break. It's very regulated. There's not a lot of autonomy. And inside this wedding industry, there's all of the autonomy, and work always comes home with you. And it is a very different pace. And there's almost a sense of not ever being able to turn it off, because especially in your case, you live there. So for anyone who's considering being in the wedding industry, what are maybe some things that you would, not to burst their bubble, but just to give a very realistic point of view on what it's like to work where you live and have your venue and have your job and your business be very inside your personal space?
Yeah. Well, I do live here. Quite literally on the property. So it's, my dad's house, which I grew up in, the venue. And then I ended up building a house right in the front. So it's like the compound. We live here, but I wouldn't change it any other way. So it's kind of all I know. But it's a work-life balance. And I think it's something that, we as a society in this country really struggle with. And being in this industry, you kind of have to turn off at a certain point and make a point of, no, like, I'm not answering your call after 6 o'clock. No, like, I'm not doing this, like, Mondays are my day off. Like, we don't get off on Saturdays and Sundays sometimes, right? So maybe Mondays and Tuesdays are your day off, or maybe only Mondays, or, maybe, in your off season, you take a couple days to yourself and spend some family time together. Like, you have to find a way to turn off. Otherwise, nobody else is gonna force you to do it, because you are your own boss. Like, there's nobody above you. You are it. So, whether, when the new year comes, or, the new season, you put it into your calendar, and there are no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, this is my week off. This is my week off. Like, for liquor distributors around here, every week, at this month and at this month, those are their shutdown. That is when they don't do any business. They don't send any liquor. They don't do anything. And those are their shutdown times, where all of their people take vacation, and that's it. So you have to balance it somehow, some way. And clients have to understand, like, we work a lot, but we're not at their beck and call all of the time. We're people too.
Yeah, and I can imagine that's challenging, especially living on the property. We've had times at our venues where people just show up for a tour unannounced, because they just kind of think it's, a business, it's a storefront. You just kind of show up during business hours, and that might be on a Monday, or that might be a time when you're not, in office per se, and they want to look around, or they want to tour. Have you ever experienced that? And if so, how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I get that, especially for events where they're like, well, can't we just leave the decorations here, and we'll be back in the morning. And it's okay because you live here. And it's like, no, it's not. Because I live here, that doesn't mean I'm coming in. Like, I still work here. Like, you go to work, I come to work. So no, rules still apply. You have to pack up everything because I'm not coming in. Like, I have a life outside of here. No. And you just have to be firm on that. But yeah, people think because I live here, I can just come over whenever. And it's like, no. And it took me a while to kind of draw that line in the sand and kind of grow a backbone for it. But if you don't, you give them an inch and they'll take a mile sometimes, and other times people are super respectful about it. But also, like, on the venue aspect of things, like, this is my home. Like, you need to treat it like yours, because do you allow people to do this in your house? Because they can't do it in mine. So, I hear horror stories too of, like, guests trashing their venues and all of the other things. And, like, I don't allow that either. So, like, it's also a good thing too, because I am on site, if something does happen, like, I'm here in a second.
Yeah, it's like a love-hate thing, because it's like good that you're there, but it's also like, like you're there. And when problems come up, I've talked to owners on this show that do live on property, and I remember talking to a couple once, and especially the guy, he was really, like, it really upset him. Someone would, like, flick a cigarette butt or leave a can or something like that, and it was very personal to them, because you're essentially, like, littering on that person's house. And you'd never go to your friend's house and just flick a cigarette butt or throw a can or something like that. But because there's this kind of commercial business aspect, people tend to treat the property differently. So I'm assuming that you've encountered that. Are there ways that you have set the expectation from the very beginning to kind of help your clients treat your property with more respect?
Well, I think it helps too that, like, we don't have people staying here. There was, like, a hot minute for a minute where we were gonna put up, like, hotels and, like, Airbnbs. I'm so glad we didn't. But, we've been around for almost 40 years. So a lot of people know that we are family oriented. We live here. Our house, like, it's literally connected to the same driveway. So I've also been used to it for a really long time. Growing up, literally living there. I mean, you could hear the music, going to sleep, listening to the dance music, like that was my life. People would party hardy till 4 a.m. I would have people like walk by the living room window. Like, they partied for a long time. They don't do that anymore. So there is a level of like, hey, you need to be respectful, but at the same point in time, like, you can't control every single thing. I have people that'll put out their cigarette butts in my planters and leave glasses in the planters. And it's like, come on, man. Like, you wouldn't do that, again, at your friend's house. Why are you doing it here? But again, like, it's just, you can't control everything. And if you're going to get mad at every single thing, like, you're just going to be really angry for a really long time at every single wedding.
Fair. Well, I'm glad we're talking about some of this because, again, if you're brand new to this and you're thinking, hey, we've got this facility here, we're going to open it on our property, like, there is more. There are some of these uncomfortable parts of this.
It never gets comfortable. Like, I get so upset when they run through my flower beds. But I mean, I'm also there too. And I mean, I also, have no problem telling people like, hey, that doesn't go there. Or here's your glass you left in my planter. But I've been doing this for so long. There's levels of like being passively nice, or hey, do you want to get off my sun patient because you're crushing it. Like,
and maybe you didn't have the, like, was it confidence, or you said growing a backbone, but maybe someone newer in the industry would be like, what's allowed? How should I react in this? And you're 40 years in, like, hey, look, you can't do this.
Yeah, and I've been doing this role now for 10. So I've seen so much. When you do it over and 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 over, it's just wash, rinse, repeat sometimes with the nonsense where it does get tiring and it doesn't always get better. But, it also depends on the clientele too. Sometimes you can tell, not every event is the event that you want. So sometimes you kind of have to feel that out, so the ones before were a lot worse than they are now.
Well, I was going to say in the time that you guys have been open and in the 10 years that you've been involved in the property, you've had some pretty incredible events. I mean, you had an event with RFK Jr.
You did.
Right? And that is certainly really cool, something great. And I want to ask you about that here in just a second. But you've also had weddings. You started, doing the fish fries. So just you personally, what's your favorite type of event to host at your venue?
I love seeing people together. So it's been my life for my whole life. So when COVID happened and just like walking through like the rooms of like nobody, it was like ghost town. It was just terrible. So seeing the rooms filled with people like just brings me so much joy. So I don't necessarily think that I have a favorite event. Weddings are beautiful. I love a good wedding where you can meet with the couple on like the first day where they have no idea what they're doing and like they have, a little bit of an idea of like their plans and their visions and their colors and like they're just so excited. And then, I meet with them on those days and then answer all of their questions. And it's like, 12 months, 18 months, sometimes 24 months before like their actual wedding happens. So it's like such a beautiful like process. It's almost like butterfly in a way. I mean, as like a metaphorical speaking, right? Like, they come in, they have no idea what they're doing. And then, you guide them through this process, you get to know them and like you become friends with them. And, obviously the more questions and things that they have and the more help that you have. I mean, sometimes I meet with them, a good amount of time, and then their wedding happens and they're so happy and it's so beautiful and how appreciative they are and thankful. And you meet their parents and their grandparents and like, it's just so beautiful. All of their hard work and their centerpieces and their favors that they tied together for their guests. And like, it's just so special. All of that work, all of those phone calls and meetings and stress. Because we all know it's not all fun. It's like them again. Or another question, 14 bullets in that email. Like venue owners know it's not all fun. It's like read the contract. Like all of those, half those answers are in your contract. But I'll answer them for you. But it's so magnificent. And then they're so happy and they're so appreciative. And then, you help them pack all their stuff and you walk them out the door. But like here, because we're so family and hands-on and like I know everything about everybody, usually, I mean, I get the ones where it's like, hey, how are you? Cool, here's your wedding. And, and then they like whatever. But a lot of them, I'll do their first birthdays, I'll do their communions, so it's more than just a wedding a lot of the times. So I love those. But the other events like, the Kennedy event, how fabulous is that? So like those other gatherings that I do, like I meet some seriously miraculous people that if I didn't have this space, I wouldn't get the ability to have people come together. So like, yes, our primary function and how my dad built this building with, a built-in DJ booth and permanent bars and a built-in platform for head tables and all of the things is for weddings. We still do other things to have the ability for people to come together.
That's awesome. That's super cool. Yeah, it's neat to have a venue that you can do different things with to kind of, break up the weddings if you want to do that, right? Like some people love weddings, but some venues are more designed for corporate events or different social events. It's cool to have a space that allows a mix. You mentioned contracts, and I want to just touch on this again because of your experience and how long you've been with your venue. Have you changed your contract significantly over the years?
I haven't changed it lately, but usually when you change your contract, it's because you got screwed. The contract is there to protect you. And you need to make your contract to protect you. Yes, it's there for them and whatever, but like never ever should you take anything out or amend your contract for them.
Have you had that? Have you had people ask that?
Attorneys are the worst. It's, well, I won't sign this unless you do this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, well, then no. Sorry.
We had an attorney one time that took the entire contract, and ours, because we operate all these venues, like we tweak things. We usually find something wrong at another venue, and they're like, we should fix that for all of them. And so the contract's steadily gotten longer, and we had an attorney one time who came through and just redlined the whole thing. I'd prefer this and this and this. I'm like, I think you have this mixed up. Like, this is not like, we didn't send this to you for your review to send back to us to no, this is something for you to sign. And they'll do that. They'll push back. So it's just really fun. It is always the lawyers. It's always the lawyers. An interesting part about that asking questions in that initial phase when you're learning about the couple, knowing what they do professionally, sometimes can help you prepare for that because you're like, oh boy,
Yep.
they're gonna go through.
You should like look them up on like LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. You can like, quickly be like, okay, so they're into like money, or, if they work for like a bank or a financial advisor, or if they work for like another menu.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Or, if they are a lawyer, if they're going to law school, or, just so you have like a heads up and you're not blindsided. Or if you have any mutual friends too, it's always like something really interesting to find out. Is like, then you can, if you're close with them or whatever, find out, the skinny. Be like, hey, I just met with so-and-so low key. What's the deal? Give them, some good things and bring them my way.
New York is such a fascinating state because you obviously have like New York, like the city where, it's so urban, and then you have parts of the state that are very rural. And so in your specific area, I'm curious how you've seen the venue industry and just kind of the wedding industry evolve over the last 10 years, pre-COVID to now. Any general reflections? And I'm kind of specifically curious on, have you seen a lot more venues opening in your area?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So after COVID, before COVID, it was like everybody wanted that whole like industrial, exposed beams, exposed pipes. That was huge. And then after COVID, everybody wants the whole the barn thing. And that was really, really popular. But I think the reason for a big thing around here was because New York's COVID regulations were so rough. One day we had one thing, another day we had another thing, and it was just so hard to keep up. So since then, it's still been a really popular thing. We're super traditional, a venue. It's, ballrooms, traditionally decorated. We have a beautiful courtyard, white tents, it's 42 by 82, if you wanted like a blank slate, outside spaced, beautiful. But, we're pretty even keel, we don't follow a lot of the ebbs and the flows of the trends. We've stayed, pretty even as far as, following the venue trends of what the aesthetics should be. And that's just because of how we're built. Decor wise, it's, your pretty chandeliers, but not over the top. Around Buffalo too, we have a lot of church weddings. We're a big, Polish, Italian, Catholic community. So a lot of our weddings get married in churches. So, we slow down around like Lent and things like that, so the on-site ceremonies are slowly picking up. But I would say a decent amount of our weddings do get married in churches.
That's really interesting because I think when you look at the whole nation, I think there's maybe a gentle shift away from that, and it's cool to hear that there are still those pockets that have that flow, or that's still in existence. I know here in California and some other places where we manage, it's that happens a lot less than it did before. When it comes to tents, you mentioned tents, and I'm curious, for anyone thinking about having a tent as a piece of their venue, are there some things that you love about a tent, hate about a tent? Is it seasonal? Setting up, tearing down, anything that you've learned in your decade of experience having a tent as a portion of your business that you could tell anyone?
So we've had a tent forever and always, because we were a huge picnic grove forever and always. We've had the horseshoe pits, we've had the basketball court, we had the volleyball nets. And then when COVID happened, we had a pole tent. So when COVID happened, we got rid of the pole tent and we got an A-frame because everybody wanted to be outside. I also got rid of the horseshoe pits and turned that into a ceremony space. My dad was really mad.
And really quick, Kate, for anyone who doesn't know the difference between an A-frame, a pole tent, could you just kind of break those down really quickly?
Right. So the pole tent, you have your big posts in the middle holding up the tent. And then an A-frame is basically like a structure. So you have nothing in the way. So it's totally movable. You don't have big posts in the way, which allotted us to have more movable space. So we had a 40 by 60 before. Now it's 42 by 82. So we went bigger because in theory, New York's regulations were going to be in effect for a long time, and we had no idea what was going to happen. So I got rid of the horseshoe pits, which were like Chernobyl could have happened again, and those things were like never coming out. So that took forever. But we got them out. So we had way more green space. So it's a beautiful area now for ceremony. So when we do have them, it's right next to the tent. And then we have walls now, which we didn't have before. So I love the tent for our outside cocktails. We only do a couple tent weddings a year because our weather here is so unpredictable. And it's connected sort of to our indoor space. So it like butts right up. So to bank on Buffalo for your weather, when you could just go inside, like that's what we do. So we'll have like our primary events inside for weddings, and then, you do outside cocktails. But we do a lot of like outdoor picnics and company events and whatnot under the tent. So, I mean, that's nice. As far as like cleaning and setting it up and all of the things, like it's a lot of work and it's not cheap. We have a company that, comes in every year, puts it up, takes it down. The aluminum frame stays up, but the vinyl comes down. But they store it on like 3 pallets every year. So I don't even store it here. They take it. So, you got to pay to store it unless you store it on site. So you have to have somewhere to store it. I just don't have the space for literally everything that I have, and then you have tables under there and chairs under there. So you have to store those in the winter if you have a winter or an off season, which we do. It's snow something fierce here.
So I'm selfishly asking a little bit too, because we took on a venue in Connecticut and it does have a tent and it's that same style. In fact, our pad is 40 by 80 actually. So it's a very similar size, but it's the annual taking up and putting down. It's the seasonality of it. There's polished concrete floors. So it's making sure that those floors stay buffed occasionally. The A-frames, it is an A-frame tent. Do you have the cabling that kind of goes across the top to kind of provide tension between the poles? Like it's like a rectangle essentially, right? So is there cabling that kind of goes across?
I don't think so.
Because ours has cabling, and I guess when they initially installed it, they installed it a little bit, the legs weren't long enough. So it was like 7 feet. And you get someone who's a little taller in there and they're like, you could definitely reach up and grab it, And so we're making some adjustments for next year, but
our tent, the middle is like 24 feet tall.
Yes, the middle, but no, like, are there any like tension cables or anything like that hold we got to get your type of tent.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Hank Parker Rentals.
Okay.
They're like international, I think.
What does it cost to put the tent up, and like, what's the annual expense on putting it up and tearing it down every year?
For both, like $8,000.
Okay.
In washing and everything, because figure, you get like the black marks on the top and then on the inside and on the top, because you have all the leaves that fall and, it's not great. And then you have like feet marks on it because the guys, they gotta like roll it and everything. So it's not ever perfect. But like when it's up, you want it to be perfect. So then when they put it up, then they like scrub it. I don't know. Like, because we've always had one, I'm not going to build a pavilion, but if I were to, I would.
Okay.
You know, and then you have the pitch of the concrete pad. So a million years ago when we had it, the code was to pitch in. So the rain comes in. So when I expanded from the 40 by 80 or the 40 by 60, I had to redo like a whole bunch of drain tile to like correct it. Why a concrete pad's code was to pitch in so all the water would come in is beyond me, but that was the code at the time, you know, when my dad put it in there.
Dang, that's wild. And that makes a huge difference. On ours, there were a couple of parts on the far side that weren't, like, it was supposed to have been pitched on an inch, like graded out towards the outside, and it was supposed to pitch on the midline. And I think on one of the parts they didn't. So yeah, we get some water pooling if we don't, you know, if it's not sealed correctly, if there's a really big storm or something.
Mm-hmm.
Tense, people, tense. And that's what this show is about, really. Like, we really want to, because if you're thinking about having a tent, you find this podcast, like, we want to go into those things. So this is huge feedback. Kate, tell me a little bit about the operations of the business. Like, how do you do catering? Is it an inclusive style venue? Is it more of one of those blank canvas or creative canvas style venues? Do people get the bar and catering from you as well, or can they bring in those outside vendors? Tell me a little bit about some of those aspects.
Yeah, so I like to consider myself semi-inclusive. You know, and that's kind of like a term I've made myself, I would say. You know, we do all of the food, we do all of the bar, and like tables, linens, chairs, flatware, all of those kind of things. I also, you know, require that they hire one of my preferred DJs. Forever and always, we always had in-house DJs. With us being a scratch kitchen, timing is so important. And I can't preface that enough with my clients, especially here. We don't have hot plates, salamanders, warmers, those hats. Like, we don't do that. My dad makes everything from scratch, usually by himself, which is a wild world. We have like one or two people that'll like help him prep, but he has everything meticulously planned out. Like the potatoes, they go on like 2 hours before dinner, and the steaks and all of the things. So timing, like if you're eating at 6, like you're eating at 6 o'clock. So, you know, if we have somebody that's a DJ and organizing the timeline and he's not on my timeline with the kitchen, like, and we can't, you know, be on the same page with introductions and speeches and cake cutting, we have a problem. So I take a lot of like pride in making sure that if I can control the controllable, which is like food, booze, and music, your events can be okay. Just, it will. You know, people remember those things. You know, they remember if they left hungry, or, you know, the alcohol was terrible, or, you know, whatever. So, I like to do all of that, you know?
I was just smiling because if the alcohol was terrible, typically they didn't drink very much of it.
Well, yeah. And then they're going to be like, and now I'm hungry because the food was bad, or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. They're going to know if like it was beautiful, right? Like, of course. But, you know, years and years from now, they're going to be like, I didn't remember what the centerpieces were.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
I mean, instantly they will. You know what I mean? Like in a week or two or a month, like, yeah, that wedding was beautiful. You know, that wedding, you know, was great yesterday, you know, whatever. But a while from now, it's going to be like the food at that place was great. The majority of them, at least. You know, I mean, my dad has really meticulously done a really good job with food. So, you know, all of our food is from scratch. All of our food is homemade. We don't allow outside caterers, our bar, all of our packages are all packaged together, which makes it easy for couples to just be like, okay, I like this one. It has this many hors d'oeuvres, this much, this tier level of bar, we get this for dinner, and that is it per person. So I know how much I'm going to need to budget, and that's that. And then any extras is extra, but at least the key essentials are set, so they know.
Yeah. And a lot of times people aren't expert planners, right? So they're coming into this, and when you can solve some of those problems for them up front, it makes it like a bit more of a seamless experience. I love that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the seasonality of your venue. And I think specifically venues in places like Buffalo, like Connecticut, there's a fair amount of downtime during the year. So how do you handle seasonality with staffing and with cash flow?
That's a challenge. It definitely is a challenge. So in the off season, well, again, is there really ever an off season, right? Do we really ever get a day off? Okay. So in my off season, which is lucky for me, I guess, is, your November, your December, your January, and your February. So it's engagement season. So for people up here in the cold weather, it's engagement season. So it's grind and hustle and book and tour and book and tour and plow a lot. So it's not really
right before you came on, or right before we started recording, you were saying 3 inches. How much snow are you supposed to get?
Yeah, we're supposed to get 3 inches an hour starting tonight. So they're saying somewhere between like 24 to 30 inches by Friday. Wow. Yeah. I'm checked out. I've already had my snow order 2 weeks ago. We already got a storm, so I've had my snow for the winter. And it's super predictable. So it's just.
So how do you handle staffing when that's, keeping a team? Like, do you have a cycling group of people who come in and help? Like, tell me a little bit about how you manage that.
Yeah, so I'm super, super, super blessed with the staff that I have. But here, because we're so family centric, and I'll die on that hill. They're really, really great, and they treat this place like it's theirs. So they stay, they have other jobs, because you have to. I can't pay them full time, and they wouldn't expect me to. So I give them their schedule, like a month and a half, because I already know what I have going on. Will I fill in things that'll like pop up, like funerals and small events and things like that? Sure. And as soon as I do, I let them know. And if they can, great. If, I'll always get people. So I have like this rolling roster of people. Like I have like my primary, people that I call, but then I have like a secondary list of people. I don't want to say like an A team and a B team because that sounds pretty terrible, but like I have like my, like I have like my primary, and then like if they can, it's like, okay, well then I'll reach out to these people. But, I give them their schedule way in advance because I have it. I do all these people's like final plans, final meetings, 90 days in advance. And it's like, okay, like how many people are you inviting? So I have like a general idea of what their event is going to consist of, so I can plan accordingly. I mean, we're all made of planners, right? Like it's like embedded in me. So like, they've sent out their save the dates. They've sent out their, sometimes already their invitations because they're so anxious. Or, if it's an event, they already have a general idea of how many people they're planning. So I have a general understanding of what I have booked, so I can plan for the staff that I have and be like, hey, we have an event this day, this day, this day, this day, this day. This is who I need. If I don't need you, who doesn't want to work and who wants a day off? And that's just kind of how it works.
So if someone's, let's say they're starting a venue in an area that is heavily seasonal, should they, like, what's a good kind of place to go to when it comes to staffing? Maybe hire like one key person that stays with them all year, and then kind of hub and spoke model, like that A team, like you said, that one person. Is that a good model?
Yeah, I mean, it's always really good to have like one really solid person. I always reach out to the colleges, like the culinary colleges, and then like the high schools. And that's kind of how I started. I mean, I'm way past that now. But like when you start, you know, kids are always really, really, at least they used to be. It depends on where you're at. I did really well with high school kids.
Something that we haven't really talked about very much on the podcast, but like high school seniors, like 18-year-old high school seniors absolutely crush. And if you can find a couple of good ones and they have great friends that are reliable and hardworking.
Mm-hmm. And then like their friends and then their friends and then their friends. And then if one drops, then it's like, okay, but then this friend and then this friend or my sister or my brother. And then you get older and older and older and then it grows. And it's like a tree. It is. I know you laugh, but it's like, it's so true. Like it's like a tree and it just grows.
We've experienced it. You have to find, and that's how we do some of the staffing. Like we find, because we're all over the country. We're in Connecticut and San Diego. I mean, it's very different, but it's always like finding that one or those two people and then saying, who do you know? And who do you know? And they're like, oh, don't hire that person. They're not good. Oh, yep, hire them. And then their siblings and their cousins and yep.
And sometimes even the kids will be so excited, they'll get their parents in. Like I've even gotten parents.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gotten parents, you know, that they're like, you know, hey, like I'm a school teacher. This is what I do. Like I'm really bored in the summer. You know, I could use a couple bucks. Great. Fabulous. I'll take it. Even if you get somebody to cover one event, just one. Sometimes you just have to get through one.
True.
Like I just need to get through this one day. I'll worry about next week. I need to get through today. And like, I think that's what a lot of venue owners get really stressed out about too, is like you see your calendar and you're like, oh my God, how can I do this? And it's like, sometimes you just need to like look at this week. Just get through what you have this week. You can tackle next week when it's next week. But right now, we're here today. We need to get through this week, you know, and just who's available this week. And then, you know, sometimes be like, hey, you were really great. What are you doing next week? And then you suck them in like a fish.
And then they're working next week and a week back. And you saw forever. I love it. Yeah. I love it. Kate, this has been really cool. Just talking about the different pieces. We've talked about a lot of stuff that we don't talk about too often. The tents, you know, some of the seasonality. So this has been awesome. If someone wants to connect with you, and I know you've been in this space for a long time, and you've got some great advice, some wisdom that you can impart venue owners, people who are interested in kind of learning more about how to run their businesses and maybe even just kind of the difficult things. What's the best place for them to reach out to you on?
Yeah, you can reach me on Facebook, on Instagram, you know, under Kotecki's. You know, I'm there. You know,
Kotecki is Kotecki.
Yes.
Awesome.
You know, this business, it's beautiful and it's wonderful, but it's raw and it'll suck you up and spit you out. So, you know, it's also very isolating and it's lonely sometimes. You know, especially when you are starting out or even when you're not. even when you've been in doing so good and so good and so good, and then something happens, whether it's the economy or family or life or kids or whatever hits you, like there are people like you. You just have to find them. Trust me, I know. It took me a while to kind of find you and, everybody else in like the MBA community and whatnot. But when you find them, like it's good to talk.
Yeah. I want to it's just like an easy time to plug Weeva, but really it's not even about like Weeva. It's, the association. I know we've talked about it before, but regardless of whether it's Weeva or kind of connecting with people on the show, which I think is really neat. A lot of people reach out and do connect with other venue owners. But whether it's here, whether it's Weeva, the association that we started and that community, or whether it's just like your local community, you make a really good point, Kate. Find people either around you or even across the country, who maybe have similar struggles that you can create that community and you create some of that camaraderie. Because you're totally right. It can feel isolating. And that's a really good word. So.
It gets lonely sometimes, and you don't really realize it until, one day you're just sitting at your desk and you're like, oh boy, because you're so busy. You're going. And then it's like, you just sit down and you're like, okay. Because nobody will tell you to stop because you are your own boss.
And because it's weekend based, which I think is something else that's not really talked about. When even other entrepreneurs, let's say you have whatever type of business, you may have a business that's based more on the Monday through Friday schedule. And so even though you are your own boss, being an entrepreneur is very different than having a job and all of that. Our job, we are entrepreneurs, but then we're also weekend-based entrepreneurs. So it's hospitality and it's entrepreneurship. So it's really flipped, and you really have to be intentional about finding your community, finding your tribe, finding the people that resonate with you. And there are going to be people that you don't resonate with in this industry, and don't get frustrated. Find the next person. Find the person that does, that you do resonate with, that you can communicate with, that is friendly and who does reach out and is not going to gatekeep information. And that's 100% accurate.
Yeah, because just like your clients, not every vendor and not every company is for you. I learned that. Even just going to Wedding MBA, like I can't buy anything on that floor. Everybody's like, hey, do you want this? Hey, are you doing this? Hey, what's this? I literally felt like a bride at a bridal show.
You're like the third or fourth person that said that about MBA. Like, I feel like a bride at a bridal show.
It was terrible. I'm like, why is there a shoe vendor here in teeth whitening?
And the hair. A lot of hair.
So much hair. Like, I already go and get my hair done. Why do I need you to do it?
Yeah.
Like,
we don't have a barbershop. Where's I was missing a barbershop, I was trying to get, the fade going on.
Yeah, some fade, some hard lines.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, yeah, just find your people. They'll help you. But
I love it. Okay, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been great. Great chatting. Thank you for sharing about your venue. And everyone, we are going to have the links to Kate's venue in the description, so you can go click on that, reach out to her. If people want to reach out directly, like, is an Instagram DM good? What's kind of the quickest?
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook. You can email me, kate@koteckies.com.
Cool. Awesome. All right, Kate, thank you so much for your time today. And yeah, we'll talk real soon.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Hey there, pardon the interruption. I wanted to take a moment and share with you about Weeva. Weeva is a professional association we started last year for venue owners and operators. It stands for Wedding and Event Venue Association, and it's the first professional association for venue owners and operators, specifically providing resources, education, and networking opportunities for venue owners and operators. Let's face it, owning a venue is very difficult, and if you own or operate a venue, or if you're considering owning or operating a venue, you need resources, networking, and a community that understands and supports you and your goals as you continue to grow your business. Weeva is just that. We've built it to be a support to you as you grow your venue business, and we want you inside of our community. So if this sounds interesting to you, please click on the link in the description in this video or wherever this video is linked, and we would love to welcome you into the community.